The Hall of Justice was not built for justice. It was built for spectacle. Vaulted ceilings arched overhead like the ribs of some long-dead leviathan, gleaming with crystalline light that made the accused seem small, fragile, and already condemned. On the dais at the center, a woman stood chained at the wrists, her wings trembling against her back, feathers dulled with dust and despair. 2 children clung to her ankles, eyes wide, skin translucent with fear. They were barely older than hatchlings by their species' reckoning, but today they had been dressed in the ragged robes of criminals, paraded before the galaxy as proof of treachery. Around them, tiers of benches rose in concentric rings, packed with delegates and spectators from across the empire. Dozens of species, scaled, furred, tentacled, feathered, had gathered to witness the trial. Not one face showed pity. Their eyes shone with hunger for entertainment, for the sharp pleasure of seeing weakness punished. They leaned forward eagerly, as if the woman and her children were not living beings, but props in a performance staged to confirm the empire's power. The presiding judge, a towering insectoid with mandibles polished like ivory, clicked its jaws and struck the resonant plate before it. The sound reverberated like thunder. "Let the record show," it droned, "that the accused stand charged with consorting with humanity, the disease of the stars, the vermin that gnaw at the roots of order. These 3 are traitor agents, unworthy of mercy." Its multifaceted eyes swept across the crowd, drinking in their approval. "We shall expose the truth of humanity's corruption, and then we shall erase it." The mother raised her head. Her voice was hoarse from days of interrogation, yet there was strength in the way she spoke, quiet but unbroken. "I have never met a human. My children have never left our homeworld. We are not agents of anything but survival." She pressed her hand to her daughter's head, shielding her. "You invent ghosts to justify your cruelty." Laughter rippled through the chamber, 1,000 tones of mockery. One reptilian delegate hissed, "Typical. Deny until the execution." Another added, "Humans are tricksters, liars. Of course their pets would deny." The children flinched at every jeer, shrinking closer to their mother. The younger, a boy barely old enough to walk, buried his face in her robes and whimpered. She stroked his hair with trembling fingers, whispering comfort she barely believed. The judge leaned forward, mandibles clacking in amusement. "Do you know what they say of humans, traitor?" It gestured to the gallery. "They say humans eat their own offspring to gain strength. They say humans worship glowing rectangles that speak lies into their ears. They say humans kill entire armies with objects as insignificant as pencils." The last word dripped with contempt. The audience roared with laughter, slamming limbs against railings, exchanging stories of Earth's absurdities. "And now you, mother of traitors, will join their myth." The mother's wings twitched, feathers lifting like shards of glass. "You laugh because you are afraid," she said softly. "Afraid of stories you don't understand." The judge's mandibles froze mid-click. The silence that followed was brittle, dangerous. Fear was not a word the empire tolerated. It thrived on confidence, on dominance displayed like banners. The mother's defiance was a spark in a chamber soaked with fuel. A guard slammed the butt of his staff against the floor beside her, making the children cry out. "Silence," the guard snarled. His species had no lips, only a beak, yet the word cut sharp enough to draw blood. The mother closed her mouth, but kept her eyes fixed on the judge, steady as stone. Above them, the vast holoscreens flickered to life, projecting the trial across the galaxy. Billions would be watching, learning what happened to those accused of alliance with humanity. The feed zoomed in on the woman's weary face, her children's tear-streaked cheeks, the chains that bound them. The empire understood drama. It understood how to turn fear into theater. The prosecution strutted forward, a gelatinous official whose form shimmered with smug certainty. "We present evidence," it burbled, "that this mother communicated with human operatives. Encrypted transmissions intercepted near her village. Symbols of human design found in her dwelling." A distorted image appeared on the screen, a crude drawing her daughter had made, a stick figure with round head and 2 eyes. The prosecutor pointed a pseudopod. "Proof." The humans marked her child, preparing her as a vessel for corruption. The crowd gasped, then howled. The absurdity of the evidence mattered less than the story. The empire knew that fear required only suggestion, not truth. The mother tried to protest, but her voice was drowned in the din. Her daughter clutched her hand tighter, small fingers digging in as if she could anchor herself against the tide. The judge raised its limbs for silence. The evidence is clear. Humanity spreads like plague. These three are its willing carriers. It turned its cold gaze on the mother. For your crime, you will suffer the same fate as all who consort with earth, erasure. Your name will be removed from record. Your children will be cleansed. None shall remember you. The little girl's cry broke through the chamber, piercing and raw. We didn't do anything. Please, we're not bad. Her voice cracked, echoing across the stone. For a heartbeat, even the crowd faltered, unsettled by the naked terror of a child begging for life. Then the laughter resumed, crueler than before, drowning her plea in noise. The mother pulled her children close, folding her wings around them like a shield. She whispered in their ears, words lost beneath the uproar, but laced with desperate love. Her heart hammered with helpless fury. She knew she could not save them, yet she would not let them face death believing they were alone. And then, from somewhere deep in the chamber, a murmur rose. At first it was only a whisper, so faint it seemed like imagination. But it spread from mouth to mouth, carried on shivers and glances. The Baba Yaga, someone breathed. He has heard. The words slid through the crowd like smoke. Delegates stiffened, eyes darting, as if the very sound summoned shadows. The empire's officials scoffed, yet unease prickled in their postures. The judge slammed the resonant plate again, mandibles snapping. Superstition. The Baba Yaga is a myth humans tell themselves to feel dangerous. There is no boogeyman here. But the murmur did not die. It thickened, gained weight, became a current of dread that wound through the audience. Stories surfaced unbidden, of ships vanished without trace, of warlords who mocked Earth only to disappear days later, of silent figures seen at the edge of vision, polite and smiling before catastrophe struck. No one could prove those stories true, but no one could prove them false either. The mother felt her children press against her, trembling not with fear now, but with fragile hope. She dared not encourage it. She dared not believe in legends when death loomed so near. Yet she too felt the shift in the air, as if the chamber itself had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. The judge raged against the silence, striking the plate until the hall rang with harsh metallic thunder. There is no Baba Yaga, it bellowed. There is only the empire, and it endures forever. But its voice cracked on the last word, and that crack spread faster than certainty could repair. In the gallery's shadowed tiers, a figure shifted. Not grand or monstrous, not glowing with alien power. Simply a man, lean, middle-aged, hair cut short. A suit of plain black fabric that seemed more suited for a funeral than a galactic trial. He sat with his legs crossed, sipping calmly from a small porcelain cup. The steam curled upward, carrying the scent of tea, utterly ordinary in a hall built on intimidation. He did not look at the mother, nor at the judge. His eyes roamed the chamber, quiet, assessing, as if he were a guest deciding whether to stay for dessert. Those nearest him edged away without realizing, their laughter faltering into nervous coughs. The whispers thickened into silence, so heavy it pressed against the walls. The mother saw him then, and for a moment her breath caught. He looked almost human, too human, in fact, to be anything else. Yet the stillness in his posture, the patience in his gaze, felt older than stars. She had never seen him before, but she knew him, as every species in the galaxy did, from stories whispered to frighten children into obedience. The polite man you never wanted to meet. The one humans called the Baba Yaga. The judge's mandibles clicked wildly, struggling to regain control. "Remove that intruder," it shrieked, pointing with a trembling limb. Guards surged forward, weapons raised, but the man only set down his cup, brushed a speck of dust from his lapel, and smiled. A smile with no warmth at all. The mother clutched her children tighter, as the air itself seemed to tighten, as if the hall had become a drum stretched to breaking. She did not know if salvation or damnation had come, only that something unstoppable had entered the stage. And in the hush before chaos, the children lifted their faces, eyes wide with dawning wonder, as though they already sensed what the Empire had forgotten. When you steal the innocent and laugh at their fear, you summon the one thing in the universe you cannot control. The man rose slowly to his feet, and the trial, no, the galaxy, held its breath. The man in the black suit did not hurry. He moved through the corridors of the Empire's judicial complex, as if he were strolling through a park on some quiet Sunday morning, nodding politely to those who gawked at him. His hands were empty, his posture relaxed, his pace unthreatening. Yet wherever he passed, guards shifted uneasily, and dignitaries found themselves stepping aside without knowing why. He apologized whenever he brushed too close to someone, even when they were the ones who recoiled, his voice calm, pleasant, cultured. The unease followed him like a shadow no light could chase away. The Empire had many prisons, but none as grand as this. Its marble floors gleamed like frozen rivers. The walls carried murals of past victories, each painted to dwarf the individual into nothingness. The architects had meant to remind prisoners of their insignificance, but the man treated the space like a gallery. He paused to study a depiction of an alien general trampling a human colony, nodding as if admiring the brushwork. "Lovely composition," he murmured, his accent a shade too precise. "Though I'd correct the detail. We don't surrender that easily." The guards escorting him exchanged nervous glances. They had been ordered to detain him, but none dared touch him. The command had felt solid when shouted by the judge in the chamber, but now, faced with this courteous intruder, the order seemed brittle as glass. The man smiled faintly, as though sensing their hesitation. "I do appreciate the escort. It's easy to get lost in these corridors. May I ask, where do you gentlemen take your meals?" The aroma earlier, something roasted, smelled delightful. His question was casual, friendly. One guard stammered an answer, and before he realized it, he was describing his home canteen, the spices his mate favored, the little shop that sold sweets for his hatchlings. The words spilled unbidden, disarming himself with details meant only for friends. The man listened intently, nodding, as though every syllable were precious. They reached the central atrium, where the dignitaries of the Empire gathered for their midday banquet. Long tables groaned beneath platters of shimmering delicacies. The alien elite feasted, laughing, oblivious to the figure who now crossed the polished floor with quiet steps. Conversations faltered as they noticed him, and silence rippled outward like a spreading stain. He offered a small bow, the gesture impeccably polite. "I apologize for intruding. I was told this is where matters of custody might be discussed." The presiding dignitary, a rotund amphibian draped in silks, puffed himself larger. "Custody," he croaked. "You presume to stand here, human, and request custody of convicted traitors?" The man tilted his head. "Convicted? Forgive me. I thought trials were meant to determine guilt, not to showcase it. But yes, that is my request. Release the woman and her children into my care. They have suffered enough." The hall erupted in laughter, shrill, booming, chittering. The dignitaries' throat sack quivered with mirth. "You believe we would hand over prisoners to a human agent? You are an insect who wandered into a furnace." The man's smile held. "Insects scurry. I prefer to walk." He stepped closer to the table, lifting a glass from its surface without permission. He inspected the liquid, sniffed, then sipped. "Interesting vintage. Too sweet. You might try decanting. Forgive me, I'm rambling." He set the glass down precisely where it had been, though it was empty now. The dignitaries stared, unsettled by the casual theft, though none dared challenge it. The dignitary regained his bluster. "Earth is a mud ball with broken satellites. Your people are scattered savages. What authority do you wield here?" The man clasped his hands behind his back. "Authority? None. Influence? Perhaps. See, you mistake courtesy for weakness. It's a common error." His voice carried no anger, only patient explanation, as if correcting a child's math. But I ask politely because that's how I was raised. Politeness keeps the room warm. I'd prefer not to chill it. Murmurs spread through the hall. Some delegates laughed nervously, unsure whether he was jesting or threatening. Others felt the hair rise along their spines, though they had no hair at all. The dignitary bristled, his pride pricked. "You dare." "I do," the man interrupted gently, and the word landed heavier than any shout. He drew a chair, sat, and folded his hands on the table as if he belonged among them. "Now, may we discuss terms?" The banquet continued haltingly. Servants refilled goblets with trembling hands, afraid to lean too close. The man ate nothing, drank nothing more, only observed. He asked questions about harvest yields, about interstellar trade, about how each delegate's people were faring this cycle. His interest seemed genuine, his compliments thoughtful. One elder, lulled by his patience, began to explain her grandson's illness, only to stop herself abruptly, realizing she had been confiding in an enemy. The man inclined his head with sympathy, promising softly, "Children should be allowed to grow. Nothing angers me more than when they are denied the chance." The mood curdled again. Assassins had been placed discreetly among the staff, and with a subtle signal, they moved. The first struck from behind, blade flashing. The man did not turn. He shifted his chair a fraction, and the blade missed his throat by the width of a breath. His hand reached for the nearest utensil, a fork, and with a flick, the assassin collapsed, weapon clattering. The man set the fork back on the table, wiped clean, as though nothing had happened. He murmured an apology to the chef. "I didn't mean to stain the rug." Panic erupted. Two more assailants lunged, blasters humming. The man rose in one fluid motion, tipping a goblet, so wine splashed into the nearest face, blinding it. The second he disarmed with a motion so quick it seemed like sleight of hand. The blaster dismantled piece by piece before it could fire. He set the components neatly in a row. "Forgive me. Please continue your meal." The hall was silent now, but for the pounding hearts of those who realized he had ended 3 lives without raising his voice, without altering his expression. He straightened his jacket, smoothed the lapel, and looked directly at the dignitary. "Where were we?" "Ah, yes. Custody." The dignitary could no longer meet his eyes. He fumbled for words, bluster drained away. You cannot, the Empire." "The Empire," the man repeated softly, savoring the syllables. "A vast machine, proud and enduring. But every machine has a flaw. The small cog, the hairline crack. Ignore it long enough and the machine stops." He leaned closer, voice lowering until it was almost intimate. "I am very good at finding cracks." The delegate sat frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. No one moved to challenge him again. His presence pressed on them, not with noise or force, but with inevitability. They had heard stories whispered in the dark corners of taverns, of a man who arrived politely and left ruin in his wake. They had dismissed them as myths. Now, the myth sat at their table, drinking their wine. The mother sat in her cell, unaware of the banquet, holding her children close. She whispered to them of home, of meadows and rivers they might never see again. The little boy slept fitfully, his sister's hand clasped in his. The guards outside shifted, uneasy, though nothing stirred in the hall. Yet the rumor spread down the corridors, passed from lips to ears, until even the prisoners murmured a name like a prayer: the Baba Yaga. When the man left the banquet, no one stopped him. He walked the halls as calmly as he had entered, carrying nothing, leaving silence behind. He reached the cell door, where the mother rose in alarm, wings flaring protectively. The children cowered behind her legs. He bowed his head slightly, as though greeting royalty. "Forgive the delay," he said gently. "Banquets always run long." His gaze softened when it fell on the children. "Don't worry. They'll never touch you again. That's a promise." The guards raised their weapons, but he merely smiled, a smile sharp as glass. The air seemed to tighten, and in that tightening, every soldier felt the weight of inevitability. The mother clutched her children closer, heart pounding. She did not know whether to fear him or cling to him. He looked at her with calm eyes that promised both salvation and destruction, and she realized the trial had never truly belonged to the Empire. It had always belonged to him. The trial chamber reopened the next day, with even greater pomp than before. News of the strange intruder had spread through the Empire like static in a storm, and curiosity pulled dignitaries from every corner of the city. The benches overflowed with species who came not for justice, but for a story, eager to see the human humiliated or destroyed. The mother and her children were dragged back to the dais, chains rattling, eyes wide. They had slept little, haunted not by nightmares, but by the memory of a man who had appeared out of nothing and spoken to them with a gentleness that felt more dangerous than cruelty. She did not know if he would return, and that uncertainty gnawed deeper than fear. The judge clanged its plate, mandibles rattling. Today, it declared, the farce ends. Humanity's agent will be unmasked. The accused will be erased. Its voice rang with brutal triumph, as though speaking loudly enough could banish yesterday's unease. Guards ringed the chamber, weapons primed, their ranks doubled since the banquet. Yet none of their postures looked steady. Whispers threaded the crowd. Stories of the assassins who had never returned, the dignitary who had stammered like a hatchling, the man who had smiled while folding death into politeness. The doors opened. He entered without ceremony, carrying a small black suitcase. His pace was unhurried, his suit immaculate, his expression calm as still water. The room shivered with recognition, though most had never seen him before. He nodded to the guards as though they were old friends, and walked to the center of the chamber. Without waiting for invitation, he placed the suitcase on the prosecution's podium and clicked it open. Every eye strained to see. Inside lay no weapon, no datapad, no trove of incriminating documents. Only a few objects, absurd in their simplicity: a roll of coins, a battered notebook, a harmonica, and a pencil worn nearly to the nub. The chamber erupted with laughter. The judge clacked its jaws in scorn. Behold, humanity's arsenal, scraps and trinkets. Is this your evidence, human? He regarded them with mild interest, as if they were the ones on display. Evidence? No. Demonstration. He lifted the pencil between two fingers, balanced it delicately. You mock what you don't understand. That's natural. But sometimes the smallest things carry the most weight. A reptilian dignitary sneered. A stick of wood cannot change the galaxy. He smiled faintly. It already has. With a flick, he drove the pencil into the desk before him, piercing the polished alloy, as though it were clay. Gasps rippled outward. He let the silence breathe before withdrawing it smoothly. Tools, weapons, symbols, sometimes are the same. It depends whose hand holds them. The judge pounded the plate. Tricks. Sleight of hand. Guard seize him. Dozens of soldiers surged forward. He sighed almost regretfully, then lifted the harmonica. The first note he blew was low, mournful, vibrating through the chamber like a funeral dirge. The sound was not amplified, yet it seemed to bend the air, a vibration that crawled along spines and rattled the marrow of bone. The guards faltered, steps slowing, breaths catching. He played a second note, sharper, and the lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the structure, systems responded to frequencies woven into that tune. The floor shuddered as locks disengaged, doors sealed, and communications scrambled into static. Panic flared in the gallery as dignitaries realized they were no longer spectators. They were prisoners. He lowered the harmonica and set it gently beside the notebook. I asked politely, he said, voice quiet but carrying to every ear. Politeness was mistaken. Now we'll do this another way. Chaos erupted. Guards fired, but the shots went wild as their targeting arrays scrambled under interference. He moved through them with slow precision, never hurried, every motion deliberate. A twist of the wrist, and a blaster clattered apart. A sidestep, and two soldiers collided, incapacitated by their own momentum. He did not roar or rage. He simply dismantled them, as one might dismantle a faulty machine. The mother clutched her children, eyes wide as she watched. He killed without fury, without joy, only inevitability. Yet between every blow, every precise motion, he glanced toward the dais, as if reminding her he had not forgotten why he was here. The children stared, awe and terror intermingled, as though witnessing a myth crawl from shadow into flesh. The judge shrieked for reinforcements, but the doors remained sealed. The dignitaries pounded on exits that would not open, their authority meaningless now. One elder slumped into his seat, muttering, "The Americans warned us. They said never wake the boogeyman." No one laughed. When the last guard fell, silence returned. He adjusted his cufflinks, wiped a fleck of dust from his lapel, and turned back to the suitcase. From it, he drew the notebook, flipping it open to reveal pages filled with neat, cramped handwriting. He set it before the judge. "This is my evidence. Lists of names. Colonies burned, villages purged, children executed. You call humans monsters, but monsters no mercy compared to this." His tone never rose, yet each word struck like a gavel. The judge tried to sneer, but its mandibles trembled. "You are one man. You cannot fight an empire." "One man can't," he agreed. "But one man can show the cracks. And once shown, others will widen them." He closed the notebook, tucked it away, and walked to the dais. The mother stiffened, wings half spread, but he stopped short, lowering his gaze to the children. "You're safe," he murmured. "I told you I'd keep that promise." The girls stared at him, trembling. "Why? We're not even your kind." His smile softened. "Every child is my kind." The boy reached for him hesitantly, and he bent to lift the child onto his hip with a care that contrasted starkly with the violence scattered across the chamber floor. The mother's breath hitched, torn between distrust and desperate gratitude. He met her eyes, calm and steady. "This trial is over. Now it's my turn." The judge shrieked, "You cannot," but the words died as he raised the pencil again, balanced effortlessly between his fingers. The chamber felt suddenly smaller, the air taut, every eye fixed on that insignificant tool. He did not move. He only smiled, a smile without warmth, without mercy, a smile that promised the galaxy had just stepped into a snare it could not escape. The chamber smelled of scorched metal and fear. Smoke curled from the shattered weapons on the floor, rising like incense toward the vaulted ceiling where banners of the Empire hung limp. The delegates pressed against the walls, their finery smeared with dust, their eyes darting like prey animals cornered in their own lair. The mother clutched her children close, wings half spread in trembling instinct. Yet her gaze never left the man in black. He seemed almost calm, as if none of this chaos had touched him. He stood at the center with the pencil still balanced between his fingers, a man out of place and yet utterly at home. "You misunderstand," he said gently, as if explaining a card trick to a child. "This was never about them." He gestured faintly toward the mother and her children. "This trial, this performance, this theater of cruelty, it was bait. And you took it." The judge's mandibles clacked in disbelief. "Bait? You dare insult." The man's smile cut across the chamber. "Not insult. Clarify. You gathered your finest here, your leaders, your voices of authority, all in one chamber, all under one roof, and you broadcast it live across the galaxy." His tone was admiring, almost gracious. "You saved us the trouble of hunting you one by one." A murmur rippled through the gallery, low and sick. Dignitaries who had strutted in on pride now hunched as though the walls had begun to close. The mother felt her children's fingers tighten in hers, their breath quick and shallow. She whispered for them not to be afraid, but her own voice trembled with the knowledge that something vast was shifting, that the galaxy itself had just changed direction. The man set the pencil gently back in the suitcase and straightened his jacket. He tapped the harmonica once against his palm, then slid it inside as well. His movements were slow, deliberate, unhurried. The silence thickened until even the crackle of sparking wires seemed too loud. When he finally spoke, it was quiet, but no ear failed to catch the words. "Operation John Wick," he murmured. "Commence." The lights flickered. At first, some thought it another system failure. Then the shadows shifted. Above the city's spires, shapes uncloaked, angular vessels black as void, their hulls marked not with sigils of conquest, but with the plain, functional insignia of Earth. They had been there all along, silent watchers in orbit, waiting for the word. Now they revealed themselves, and the stars disappeared behind their wings. Inside the chamber, screens sparked to life, broadcasting the sight of the fleet. Alien dignitaries gasped, recoiled, shouted orders into dead comms. None of their ships stirred. Every channel was jammed, every code subverted. The man in black watched their panic with the patience of a predator who has already bitten the throat. "You assumed humanity scattered," he said, voice still calm. "You assumed we were weak, desperate, clinging to scraps of history. What you never understood is that we prefer to be underestimated. It keeps the element of surprise fresh." The judge banged the resonant plate, its chittering shrieks rising. "You cannot destroy us. We are the Empire, billion strong." The man turned, his gaze falling across the huddled assembly. "Billion strong, yes, but brittle. You mistake size for strength. Empires always do." He knelt then, to meet the mother's eyes. The children pressed against her, wide-eyed, trembling. His expression softened, and he brushed dust from the little boy's hair with infinite care. "Do not look," he whispered. "This next part is not for children." He rose and strode toward the judge. The insectoid loomed, carapace gleaming, mandibles clattering with outrage and fear. "You will be executed," it spat. "Your species eradicated." He paused before the dais, studying the creature as if considering which word to choose in a sentence. Eradicated. His tone was mild, conversational. "Strange how that word keeps circling back to you. You say it with such confidence, as though history hasn't already chosen its favorite irony." He leaned close enough for his reflection to shimmer in the judge's faceted eyes. "It's not us who will vanish." The doors thundered as explosions echoed through the city. The fleet above had not fired a shot, yet strongholds crumbled, power grids failed, arsenals turned dark. Human sabotage had burrowed deep, hidden for years, waiting for the right spark. That spark had come. The dignitaries stared at the screens in horror as their empire unraveled in real time. Armies silenced, fleets dead in the void, entire systems severed from command. They realized with growing dread that the trap had not sprung in this chamber alone. It had been seeded across the galaxy, meticulously planned, impossibly patient. The humans had not come to plead. They had come to end. The man looked back at the mother. She met his gaze with a mixture of terror and gratitude. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse, wings trembling. "Why save us?" His answer was simple, almost tender. "Because you're innocent. Because your children remind us of ours. And because there are lines we do not forgive anyone for crossing." His eyes hardened. "You threaten children. That ends empires." He turned again, and the chamber seemed to shrink around him. The dignitaries, once proud, were now animals cornered in firelight. Some begged, some cursed, some whimpered for mercy. He regarded them with the same detached courtesy he had shown since arriving. Humanity is polite. We ask before we take. We knock before we enter. But when kindness is mistaken for weakness, he let the silence finish the sentence, heavier than any word. The judge hissed, striking out with a clawed limb, but he caught it effortlessly, twisting until the joint cracked. The sound silenced the chamber. He did not gloat. He did not roar. He only whispered, "Trial dismissed." And with a single motion, the judge was broken, crumpled like paper beneath the weight of inevitability. The chamber convulsed with fear. Delegates collapsed to their knees. Others pressed themselves against walls, as though they might melt through stone to escape. The man did not pursue them. He simply walked back to the dais where the mother stood, gathering her children tight. He extended a hand to her. She hesitated, heart pounding. But when her daughter reached first, small fingers curling into his, she followed. His grip was steady, warm, human. Together, they crossed the chamber. Guards shrank from their path. No one moved to stop them. The great doors parted, and the corridor beyond lay open, filled with smoke and the wailing of alarms. He guided them forward, never rushing, never faltering. Every step was an act of quiet defiance, a message to all who watched. You cannot frighten what has already embraced the darkness. Beyond the prison, the city burned, not with fire, but with silence. Systems shut down, streets empty, towers darkened. The fleet loomed overhead, vast and implacable, yet still holding fire. They did not come as conquerors. They came as teachers. The lesson was written in absence. Power is nothing without control. Control is nothing without mercy. And mercy is something the Empire had abandoned long ago. At the landing platform, a human shuttle waited, matte black and unadorned. Its ramp lowered with hydraulic sigh. The man gestured for the mother and children to board. They hesitated at the threshold, staring back at the ruins of their world, then at the man who had torn it open with nothing more than patience, precision, and promise. The mother whispered, "What happens now?" He looked up at the sky, where the fleet hung silent as executioners. His answer was quiet, but it carried like thunder. "Now the galaxy learns what happens when you hurt what we love." The mother led her children inside. He lingered on the ramp, scanning the horizon as explosions rolled like distant thunder. His eyes held no triumph, no joy, only inevitability. He had done what needed to be done. He always did. And somewhere deep within the fleeing survivors, whispers already took root. Stories would spread of this day, distorted, exaggerated, reshaped by fear and awe. They would speak of the polite man who smiled as he dismantled an empire. They would call him the Baba Yaga. The ramp began to rise. He turned at last, stepping into the shuttle's dim light. The children huddled against their mother, whispering questions she could not answer. He sat across from them, folding his hands, posture composed. He studied their faces, memorizing them, anchoring himself to innocence in the midst of carnage. The girl met his gaze with fragile courage. "Are you going to hurt them all?" His expression softened, but his reply was cold steel wrapped in silk. "Not all. Just enough that the rest never forget." The shuttle lifted, engines humming low. Through the viewport, the fleet shifted formation, wings unfolding like predators stretching after long sleep. The city dwindled below, a carcass left for history. The man in black closed his eyes briefly, exhaling once, as though releasing the last tether of restraint. When he opened them again, they were calm, merciless, and ancient. He looked at the children, then at the stars. "Tell your people what you saw," he whispered, though whether he meant the mother, the children, or the galaxy itself, none could tell. "Tell them humanity was polite, until it wasn't." The shuttle cut into the void, swallowed by the shadow of the fleet. And as the Empire cracked across its spine, the legend grew teeth.